fly the airplane as slow as it can go. Captain Lee's not supposed to get the airplane anywhere near that slow. But we find the edges of that envelope and make sure that the airplane is safe for Captain Lee and all of you that fly with it. But really there are no typical days because doing those things requires stepping back a couple of months and studying airplane flight test accidents to make sure that doesn't happen to us, studying the airplane, figuring out a safe way to do that test, because we're not Chuck Yeager. We don't just go out and fly around. We know what we're doing is dangerous, and we try to stack the deck in our favor and mitigate the risk. We fly with experienced pilots, many of whom are former military pilots. We monitor data, so Captain Lee's just looking at her airspeed indicator, but when we're doing flight testing, we've got 2 or 3 people watching reams of data on computer-generated displays, monitoring what's going on in the airplane, the speed, what's going on with the electronics and the engines and so forth. We do flutter testing to make sure the airplane's not going to vibrate, and I'm sure Captain Lee appreciates all that. But we've studied these things, we stack the deck in our favor, and then when we get back on the ground, sometimes we have to tell the pilot, we need you to do that one again because it didn't look right. And sometimes we say, hey, stop, this looks bad, we need to go home. But once we're done with that data, we get on the ground, we compile that data into a report, we write a report, and sometimes we give it to the FAA. Sometimes the FAA says, Pete, I trust you. You say it's certified, and it's certified. But we still have to write that report, and we have to communicate that the data is good. And those are typical days in flight test. Yes?
Do your pilots have to wear parachutes in case something goes wrong?
In certain circumstances, the pilots will wear parachutes. But very frequently, on a big airliner type, I've worked on.
Well, you said the test, whether it's a dangerous thing they're doing, so just in case, right?
Yeah.
Get out of there?
We don't have ejection seats. We don't put ejection seats in airplanes like the 777 or the 47.
Oh. So you're testing commercial airlines, right?
I've done commercial airplanes, yes.
Yeah, so there's no eject for that anyway.
No ejection seats.
Yeah, you can't get out of that. You're in there.
Well, which is good, right? I mean, as a passenger,
TV Cooper got out.
There's a reason you're not allowed to carry a parachute onto an airliner. Right?
If you see your pilot step on a parachute, I think hard about getting in that flight.
But this is for the testing thing. This is
For military flight tests where there's a seat or an ability to get in there.
I have one more question for you. Are you testing individual airplanes that are going to be flown by the pilots? Or are you testing a model of airplane to sign off on the model as being foolproof?
We usually test the first 1, 2, or 3 of
It's
the
rolled
types
off of
and certify it for the rest of the fleet. So
oh, gotcha.
I may have flown, testing on Captain Lee's airplane, but it was after we were done with it that we delivered it to United Airlines and they fly.
So let's let Robert address the question of the typical day, and then just because of our time, then I will do is a Q&A session, so some of the students have an opportunity to ask questions of the different panelists for the last 15 minutes.
okay, typical day, if my shift starts at 7 a.m., and I say if because we were rotating shifts, each day we have a different shift start time, so fatigue is a big issue in the industry, but again, it's the funnest thing I've ever done. So if my shift starts at 7 a.m., I'll arrive at work, maybe 15 or 20 minutes early, and then I'll report to the tower, or the top of the tower. I sign in. You will get assigned from the supervisor either the ground position. We have 2 grounds. The local position, and the local position controls the runway traffic. All the airplanes departing and landing on the runways, that's the local controller. There's 2 local controllers. There's a helicopter position for the helicopters. There is a clearance delivery position that's giving the route structure that the pilots will fly. So the supervisor at 7 a.m. will say, okay, go work ground 1. I'll work ground 1 for maybe an hour and a half. At 8:30, someone who's coming off of a break will be told, okay, go get Robert a break. I will take a 30-minute break, come back at around 9 a.m. They might tell me to go work local 2. Might work local 2 for an hour and a half to 2 hours. Next person gets me out, they say, okay, go take a lunch. That lunch might be anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how many people called in sick that day. After taking lunch, I'll come back and say, okay, go work ground two. And so you just rotate around the tower, work various positions, and then your 8-hour day is over. It's only an 8-hour day because the FAA pays for our lunch, because while we're eating, there's a possibility that an emergency or an accident might happen and you may get called right back up. So if you're halfway through a meal, that's too bad, you have to go back to work. So all your breaks are paid for within the structure of the 8-hour shift. So that would be a typical type of air traffic control day. When I worked at LA Center, which is a radar environment, dark room, you get a chance to work all the blips on the screen that you hear about, and you get to talk to the pilots that are at the 30 and the 40,000 feet level, and you're dealing with a lot more complex, a lot more fast-moving airplanes. Military pilots, you're dealing with all the airplanes that are flying up there, all of them. And you can imagine the type of missions that are being flown for your safety, for your freedoms and everything out there. So it's really fun. And that would be a typical day.
LA Center's out in Palmdale, isn't it?
LA Center, yes, it's out in Palmdale.
Why do you call it LA Center?
They call it Los Angeles Air Route Traffic Control Center. A lot of the centers are located in various parts of the United States. They were built in locations away from main populations. They were built during the Cold War. So if there were to be a missile attack and they decide to take out the centers, they won't take out a major group or major population along with it. So a lot of the centers, like LA Center, the Oakland Center, the Tracons are not the centers. So the centers are like an ultra-high altitude stratum. The approach facilities, which is also a radar facility, they tend to be the middleman. They work the airplanes right after they've departed, climb them to up to maybe 15,000, 17,000 feet, and then they also descend them from that altitude, line them up for the approach, and then they give them to the individual towers.
How far out are they when they change over to LA?
About 5-7 miles out, and they talk to them when they're about 30 to 35
Anytime
miles
LA
away.
Center is.
Let me just do a clarification, just for the younger folks. You know, we get this idea that all of the airplanes coming into LAX, and you know, we see them all the time, and we think, oh, they're just being controlled by the one tower. They're not. Most of those guys are being controlled out in Lancaster. So a lot of the stuff here is just the stuff that's happening right here immediately, but most of the other stuff's all happening outside, and that's what they were talking about why it's out in Lancaster.
Do you see those contrails, those contrails of airplanes? Those airplanes are being controlled by LA Center, which is in Palmdale.
What's the range of?
So let's,
approximately, wow, all the way down to the Mexican border, up north to around Fresno, to the east, the southern tip of Utah, the northwest edge of Arizona.
It's a lot of LA.
And then to the west, as far west as radar allows, which is only just 200 miles west.
Ms. Everett and then Ms. Bernstein.
I just gotta know what happens on your 32nd birthday. Do they give you a gold watch and say thanks so much?
No, on your 30th, basically, if you cannot get hired before.
It's like the military.
After.
Oh, you can,
sorry.
then I wasn't clear on that. I thought after 31 you're done.
No,
You
you
know,
have to
it's like a
retire.
football player, you're too old, you
You
know?
have to retire at age 56.
Oh, okay, I didn't understand that, so it was clear.
So basically, you would get your 25 years in if you
Okay,
got
all
hired
right.
right at
I was
age
like, that sucks.
30. Retired at 56, you have your 25 years full retirement.
Okay, that's fine.
So at 56, you go into management then?
At age 56, either you retire because you're forced out, or if you go into upper management, there's no timeout age. So that would be the motivation for those who want to keep working, and you have things going on in your life where you don't want to retire yet. You can't retire yet.
Joe?
First for Captain Judy. I'm an English teacher, and my students, as freshmen, read a piece of historical fiction about a woman who tries to become a pilot. Before the Air Force existed, when it was the Army Air Force. And we were doing research, and I actually, and so do my students actually, believe that there really aren't any female commercial pilots. I am so thrilled and surprised to see you. how large is the population of commercial pilots? How many are there? And I'm talking, my students are going to understand commercial meaning United or American, not privately owned jets.
That's a very good question, because we recently had this discussion among us. We are 6% still after 37, almost 40 years. Yeah, so it will take another generation to increase numbers.
Several generations.
Yeah.
Can I have a few more questions?
I'll give you one.
Okay. And because in the novel that they're reading, they finally fly planes for the military, but not on any kind of military mission. They're taking the plane from the factory to a base, kind of thing. They're delivering.
Very powerful.
This is to become a pilot or a female pilot. Is pretty much all of it military training, or do people become airline pilots in any other venue besides the military?
There are two routes to go. One is civilian, one is military. I came through the civilian route because military would not allow women at the time. Now, women are very well integrated into the military, and I think it's a preferable route for a couple of reasons. One is it's much more fun flying, and number two, civilian has become extremely expensive, almost prohibitively expensive. And there are
You need the training.
yes, and there are few scholarships available, unfortunately.
I have two other questions. You said your salary, Mr. John Brown, your salary spread was 30 to 180K. What's the difference? Is it years experience, raises, increases you at 180K, or because you said you're on an 8-hour shift? I don't know if you're doing overtime. I hope not. How do you get there?
There's an entry-level salary. You go to Oklahoma City, which is the location for the academy, and you go through training there. And at that point, you're getting the 30,000-ish range, plus per diem, which is $70 or something a day. If you finish the academy, which is about 3 months, if you finish it, then you get assigned the facility you're going to work. It could be Long Beach Tower, it could be LA Center, it could be Santa Monica Tower. You won't get assigned LAX Tower because they've had too many failures with no experience, so they just say, we will never do that again. So you'll get assigned one of those facilities. As you progress, as you get certified on various positions, you get individual raises to the point where if the facility you're working is a level 9 facility and you only have 12 levels for each facility. So LAX right now is a level 11. LA Center is a level 12. So in LAX 12 facility, the controller is making the max money. The 11th facility, they might be making $10,000 less than the max level. So at a level 9 facility, when you get certified, you might be making $70,000, $75,000 a year. So
Which is what I made
there's a
after 40
range.
years of teaching.
Right. Okay, so
My last question. Here's my last
briefly,
question.
go ahead.
I'm going to have a project where my students have to advertise an airline. So which of you persons is going to help me? Which of your people? I'm serious. Which person would I contact? If they're going to, I saw advertisements for airlines in LA Times, Holiday Magazine, and I saw these pictures of airplanes that had, they were going to Asia. They had beds and semi-private, modules, and you could have your own Wi-Fi, and I had never seen anything like this in an airplane in my entire life until I saw the picture. I thought it was made up. So, and I thought, I think you're wrong.
He's got a business card for you.
And I'm going to take it.
Yes, I think so. Okay, we had Lillian has a question.
So considering that you work in an industry where you are responsible for all of these other people, do you think it's vital to have stress coping skills in order to effectively do your job? And this can be answered by anybody.
The short answer is yes.
What's stress?
300 July's on your hand.